Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another preview podcast for the Tip Sheet. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, joining me for what looks to be a pretty gloomy King's birthday long weekend is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, despite the, well, I wouldn't quite describe it as inclement, but as the dreary weather sets in, still got 3 games of football. And how you doing for all those 3?
Yes, the precipitous conditions. There you go, mate. I'll jump in with that. Let's hope they've cleared up by Monday. It's a strange sort of weekend, isn't it, in terms of the Eels scheduling, because we will be working through this, interestingly, in a bizarre order, because we've got the New South Wales Cup on Friday afternoon. We've got the Jersey Flegg on Saturday, and both of those games are down in Wollongong. And then we've got the NRL on the Monday, the King's birthday Monday, out at Accor Stadium. So we're a little bit all over the place in terms of being able to go and watch our teams this weekend. But we are now here on Thursday afternoon recording this preview podcast and looking to get it out so that people have a bit of a run through on what's likely to happen in the New South Wales Cup and the Jersey Flegg in the early part of the weekend.
Yes, sir. And before we do our deep dive on all 3 grades, Flegg, Cup and NRL, as always, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the Tip Sheet, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. You know how much we rate Greg and the crew, fantastic partners for both TCT and our podcast. So massive thanks to them for getting us up on the air. And let's get into it, big fella. You mentioned the 3 grades, and chronologically not starting with the Flegg because that was on Saturday, as you alluded to. It's an 11:15 a.m. kickoff out at Collegian Sporting Complex in the Gong. They're tipping the ground conditions to be good and the weather to be fine, but we'll have to wait and see there. Eels taking on the Dragons naturally, and Parramatta coming off a massive comeback win against the Sharks, down 16-0 in the hole, winning 26-16. Fantastic result. And you mentioned that Jock Brazel had pretty much a career game in that one there, was outstanding. Well, we're going to need more of that from all the boys. They come to this round ranked 12th, and they're meeting the 9th placed St. George Dragons. They're 3 wins adrift of the top 6. It is just 3 wins, not 3.5. So got to get kicking, and to do that, they look like this. At fullback, it's Zach Hunter, Mo Alamadine on one wing, and Bo Newlands on the other. Antioch Vitala Mariner and Araz Namba are in the centres. In the halves, Arpa Tweedle continues to show his versatility as he bounces between the 1 and the 6, and he's in the halves this week because Joshua Wynn is being called up, at least provisionally, to the New South Wales Cup, and he partners Matt Hunter at number 7. Front row sees Sam Tuivasa and Teenkin Brown in the 8 and 10 respectively. Riley Smith, who's been a fantastically consistent performer, is in the number 9. Jock Brazel, Dom Destratus on the edges, Saxon Pryke at lock forward. Interchange, Yaya Ayachi, Max Tupou, Damascus Nemia, and Raf Destratus, which is Dom's twin brother. Devonto Vivella is the 18th man or concussion substitution. Yeah, so we've seen them have some good results now, 60s. If you look at their body of work going into that global bye, where they've dropped the game against Melbourne, but they've had wins either side of that, they've actually got a pretty good vein of form going here, but they're going to need to tap into that if they're going to keep making that ascent up the ladder.
Is 3 out of their last 4?
I believe the Melbourne game being the aberration there, where they went down to Melbourne and just didn't get into gear.
Yeah. Talking to one of the fellas about that, it was really a case of just a few too many errors and, as you said, never really getting into it. Josh Lynn was a late withdrawal from that game. I believe, like literally at the airport, sort of late withdrawal.
Yeah.
So, just being unwell. So that's how late I believe the change was for that game. So last week, to be down 16-0 in the conditions that prevailed out at Shark Park. I mean, it was literally a lake, the field. It was surface water from dead ball line to dead ball line, and sections of the in-goal area literally being underwater. Countless line dropouts that were forced by both teams. Very difficult to defend close to the line, and mostly because if you weren't getting bodies in front, if you were tackling from side on or from behind, there was that slide into the in-goal factor. Some tries as well from the kicks into the in-goal. As I said, lots of line dropouts forced, but tries certainly scored where the ball was kicked in. It wasn't going to roll dead in those conditions. It just plugged in the with all that surface water. So really good to come out of that with the win. Just mentioned about Jock Brazel having possibly the best game that I've ever seen him play, attack and defence, and just the aggression in his play. Like he was really getting into the faces of the Sharks. So what we need to see this week really is more of the same. There's a really good team spirit. Just watching how they're playing, they've really got each other's back. It's reminiscent of the sort of spirit that was in the SG Ball team last year, and then was brought up as well into the Flegg team last year in that run through to finals football. So I thought that last year the coaches did a really good job of getting the team in that right frame of mind. Craig Brennan being able to really blend the SG Ball and the Flegg team into such a cohesive and spirited unit. And I think we're seeing the coaches this year in Jordan Rankin and Steve O'Day being able to do a similar job with the Flegg team and the blending of those players that have come up from SG Ball and those who are already in Jersey Flegg. And as I said, that spirit seems to be going a long way towards their recent form. Combinations are a lot better, and I'm going to tip a win here, mate.
Yeah, well, looking at the Dragons' form over last month, it's actually the polar opposite of the Eels. They've had 3 losses and the 1 win. So this is a good opportunity for Parramatta. I think a win is on the cards here if they, again, just keep themselves in a competitive situation, even if it's close and they've got a bit of work to do. They've definitely got the team now to pull it all together in the back end of a game. So I will tip a Parramatta win.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what was interesting about the confidence last week is that, yes, there was a lot of kicking in the game, and especially in the red zone, in plugging those kicks in the in goal. But there was a lot of ball movement. You don't have that sort of ball movement if you don't have confidence. And I don't know what the completion rates ended up being, but given the conditions, I thought they were more than reasonable. So, look, I'll go for a 12-point win here to the Eels, and they keep on this roll that they've got going at the moment. I think they're 2 wins behind the Dragons on the table, so I think it will be a reasonably competitive match. But if both teams carry their form, as you said, the Dragons having a bit of a down run, the Eels having a bit of an up run, the Eels get them.
Yeah, and they're going to need to have this game if they're going to make that run up the ladder. Got a lot of work to do. 3 wins between them and the top 6 is a huge gap to try and ascend through. But get the tyres kicked this week and make some difference. So that brings us to the second game on the docket, but the first game chronologically. This one is on Friday, 5:40 p.m. kickoff at Wynn Stadium. Presumably the curtain raiser to NRL game, if I had to guess. I'll just quickly check NRL.com, see what's happening tomorrow night. Yeah, Dragons and Tigers playing at 8 o'clock, so there you go. That makes plenty of sense. And fortunately, if you have a New South Wales Rugby League TV subscription or the free trial available, you can watch this one online, so make sure to jump onto that. And this is the 10th place Eels taking on the 5th place Dragons. Eels having such a great run across the last 5-6 weeks, looking for 5 straight against Newtown Jets, and then they stumbled and kind of bumbled their way into a loss that wasn't, was it like 36-18 in the end, 60s or something like that, 34-18. And that was probably a bigger reflection than the contest itself, because the Eels had a bad night of goal kicking off Dejan's boot. And I think there was a couple of unfortunate aided tries or assisted tries from some bad play. So the Eels weren't as far off the pace as it looked, even though they played poorly. But
Yeah, it was one of those games where you mentioned the goal kicking. So that was 4 tries, could only kick the 1 goal. And Dejan had been kicking exceptionally well recently, been landing them from all over the place, and just couldn't quite do it. And unfortunately as well, it was critical because in their attempt to come back in that game, it would have been a very, very close scoreline early in the second half were it not for the missed goals. And unfortunately, a couple of errors and almost gift tries to the Jets ended up putting that game beyond the Eels' reach. Look, I've got to say it. I don't think the scoreline reflected the difference between the teams, but it did reflect, I guess, a little bit of the bounce of the ball. I think some of the calls were a bit rough. Ultimately, the Jets were the better team, but maybe it would have been a 4 to 6 point game, not the sort of margin that it stretched out to. Again, as we talk about the Eels, I'll let you run through the team first, mate, before we get into the ins and outs of the players.
And not too much happening in this grade in terms of player transactions and moves. More a reflection of what's happening in the NRL. So we start at fullback, Zach Sini, who's been really solid at the back for the Eels since taking over midway through the season. Lorenzo Molitalo and Isaac Lumi on the flanks as the backline stocks get hurt that much more for the loss of Bowie Simonson. Morgan Harper and Jake Tungle are in the centres. Joshua Lynn gets the call this week into the number 6 position. We have to wait and see whether that's going to stay true, and we'll find out obviously very quickly because it's under 24 hours to kick off now. But temporarily or provisionally, he is now partnering Ethan Sanders in the halves. Front row sees Luca Moridi and Brock Parker working with Matty Arthur. Back row is Keir, Dury and Geimer. Interchange is Manny Luke, Kyle Castle, Will Latu and Reece Alderton. No named 18th man, so I have to wait and see with that one there. And looking at that Dragons team, they've actually been pretty good. They've got a young gun, Sevilio Tamale, playing fullback this week. Mikali Ravalawa's been dropped to cup for the second week running, I want to say. Christian Tuipulotu is another NRL experienced player there. Who else they got in this one here? Michael Molo, younger brother of Francis Molo there. So pretty well-balanced team across the park here, and obviously sitting in 5th place on the ladder. 7 wins to their name to Parramatta's 5. So the Eels aren't too far out of touch there. 2-game bridge to get across, and obviously the loss of the Jets hurt them there because it could have been just 1 win behind the top 6. But they've got form. They've been hurt by injuries elsewhere this week, which is always frustrating when you're the cup because you're right in the sort of fire when it comes to those player transactions. But still a chance to get back on track and still hunt down for that spot inside the top 6.
Yeah, still players that are out. You mentioned about Dejan Arce. We don't know what's going to happen there because he's been named as on that extended reserves list for the NRL. It's the same also with Joey Lussick. We know that Bailey Simonson's out for the year. We've also seen Offa Hickey Ogden is still going through his journey back from rehab. Alongside him, a player that people have maybe forgotten about because he's been out for an extended period with a hamstring injury, and that's Tony Mattielli. So he'd be due back soon. But as things stand, the Eels are down to 26 players in the top 30 with Bailey Simonson now out for the season. And I guess you'd be talking about 24 fit players with the continued rehabilitation journey of both Tony Mattielli and Offa Hickey Ogden.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an ultra skinny top 30 that the Eels are dealing with. And you'd have to say that with losing a player who sits outside the top 30 in the development list in Ethan Martin on the wing, that it does make it very, very difficult because you've now got 3 players well, actually 4 players in the Eels back line who sit neither in the top 30 development list and just to rattle those off, so you've got Lorenzo Mulatalo, who sits outside those lists, Jake Tungor, Isaac Lumi, and Joshua Lynn. So 4 players there that aren't full-time footballers are running around in the New South Wales Cup team. And normally when you've got, say 30, between 34, 36 players who are full-time in terms of the top 30 and development squad, and I know there's a few players that every club has that are on second-tier deals, but they are able to train full-time. But still to have these players sitting out, so many sitting outside those lists, and they're running around in New South Wales Cup. And, of course, they're joined by Matty Arthur, who's on neither of the top 30 or a dev contract, Brock Parker, Dan Keir, Manny Luke, Kyle Castle, Will Latu, and Reece Alderson. That gives you an idea about how stretched the Eels are in terms of available players. So, we cannot afford any more injuries to outside backs, because what will then happen is, if we were to lose another winger, if we were to lose a centre, they can bring up Morgan Harper. But if they were to lose another winger, then I guess you'd be looking at maybe a reshuffle of the back line, whether it's Harper that is elevated, or whether it's Zaxini that gets elevated. And I think we've seen that Zaxini's best position is probably at fullback at the moment. I think he's performed a lot better as the fullback in New South Wales Cup than he has at centre or wing.
It keeps him engaged in the games. I think there's a big thing.
It does. So, and I think he gets to show his attacking prowess a lot more than being required to do the defensive work. He's simply got to get the defence organised in front of him. So, it's disappointing for Ethan Martin for a start. He's out for about 8 weeks or something like that with a hamstring. He was just really starting to become an influential factor in this team, because he's only needed half chances to convert, and he's been able to convert them into tries. And I think they were probably missing that last week against the Jets. But look, there's still plenty of things to like about the team. I think they've got, I guess the main experience there in the back line is Morgan Harper, because outside of that, there isn't too much first-grade experience in that team.
No.
And then you look at actually, we could talk about that as well for the entire team, because I think the most experienced person there is probably Matt Dury, and he doesn't have a huge number of first-grade games on his resume. So after Morgan Harper, it's probably Matt Dury. Not sure how he compares to Luca Moretti in terms of games, but we know Luca hasn't got a huge number of games under his belt either. So in terms of experience, it's quite an inexperienced Eels team, isn't it, mate?
Yes, indeed. And that's why their run has been so positive to see. And even some of the earlier football they played, where they were being competitive but not, getting across the line. So they've been punching above their weight for a large part of the season. Again, injuries outside their control are, taxing them. And I think that because of this is going to be a tough game. The Dragons are obviously a pretty well put together team.
Did they beat the Panthers last week, was it?
Let me have a quick gander at last week's draw. And
I just have it in the top of my head that
they did. They comfortably beat the Panthers too, 26-10 out of Bluebet. So they're going to be a pretty tough proposition this week. And I think our boys are going to be competitive, and they're going to give themselves a shot at victory. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get across the line, though. It's going to be a tough game. So I don't know how to tip this one. I think with the heart, definitely Parramatta, obviously. But with the head, this is going to be tough. And I think the Dragons going to be modest favourites, I think.
Well, who are the key players for you in this one, mate?
For the Eels, I mean, again, you don't overthink this sort of stuff. You look to the spine to take advantage of the opportunities created elsewhere. So that means that the young guns and Sanders and Lynn need to perform at least adequately. And I think they've done a good job in that when they've worked together in the early opportunities this year. But again, you need a platform for the middle, which means Moretti, Parker, Geimer. And you need your outside backs just to be tidy. They don't need to be stars. They just need to make good tackles and pass the ball and run smartly.
Well, how important is Matt Arthur to this team?
Oh, look, he has been their MVP this season, no doubt. Like anyone that's watched more than 20 minutes of this season will say that Matty's been their best by and there's been some good performers, but he's been their best by some margin. So I think he sets the tempo for this team as well. So he creates opportunities through the middle, good service, through the red zone, across in between the 20s as well. Smart kicking game. So yeah, he definitely is the heartbeat of this roster. But it's on those other players I was mentioning before, your 6, your 7, your front row, to help him put the Eels in a position to succeed and win.
It's really his ability to read the game, isn't it, that sets him above a lot of players at this level.
Yeah, clearly he's 5 seconds ahead of pretty much everyone else in between the ears here. You watch him and he's scheming, and he's watching the markers and looking at the defence, counting numbers down the blind side constantly, so he can take his shot and succeed way more than he doesn't. So typical coach's son sort of stuff, isn't it? Where they're just very, very well advanced on obviously the one-on-one stuff, but also the more advanced concepts when it comes to elevating yourself to the levels that is required to be an NRL player. And Matty's been fantastic in that regard this year.
Yeah, I think a lot of supporters have been calling on him to be elevated to the NRL interchange. Because he sits outside both the NRL and the development contract list, he had to wait till after round 10 to become available, or eligible, I should say, for NRL. So it'll be interesting to see how long it is before the likes of Woodsy and you'd have to say Charlie Geimer as well, to those two maybe to be the next to debut.
Yeah.
But look, Matt Dury, he's been probably one of their strike weapons this year. The lines that he runs on the edge have been absolutely phenomenal. His return from injury has also coincided, I think, with a lift in the form of the New South Wales Cup. He gives them that punch, on the edge that sets their attack at a different level. You talked about the work of the spine. We've given credit to all of those players: Zaxini, Josh Lynn, Ethan Sanders, Matt Arthur. Obviously, Lynn, Sanders, and Arthur have that combination going right back to the SG Ball competition, and they were certainly instrumental in delivering the premiership in that grade, and also taking the Jersey Flegg team to the preliminary final. But outside of that, Brock Parker was part of that Flegg team last year. He's become a really, really consistent performer. The difference between Brock's best and worst games are absolutely minimal. He's just such a consistent footballer. Look, Dan Kears again had to be Mr. Versatile. They've played him out in the centres as well as in the back row. He's been handed the captaincy for games, so we have to give him a bit of credit. And also, just looking at that interchange bench, Will Latu starting to make his presence felt at this grade, mate. He's punched up from the Jersey Flegg side last year, and I think he's doing quite well. Manny Luke has been a good foil late in the game for coming on to give Matt Arthur just a little bit of a breather in that middle period during the second half. And because he's really a running dummy half, at running up against the tired legs of the defence. He's been quite effective. Just gives a little point of difference there at the right time. We didn't know too much about Reece Alderton before this year. He's certainly done his job. And how long has it been since Kyle Castle was in the Eels pathways? I'm remembering.
It's been a few years. It's going back a while now, I think. So
yeah, because he was in the junior representative teams, was he
2018
not?
maybe.
Yeah, I have it, just without checking it, I'd be thinking it's 2018 or earlier, but I mean, I could be wrong. So it's good to see that he's still around the Eels system. So, tips for this one, John?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, the Dragons probably slight favourites, which means Parramatta have a real chance to get a win here if they bring their A game. So heart says Parramatta. I'll go with the Eels, but respecting the Dragons as very worthy opponents.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game where it's going to come down to those key players that we talked about. I think they really have to assert themselves early in this. I don't want them to be playing catch-up football in any way away from home against a team that probably has quite a bit of confidence that they're building. They've got the players with a bit more first-grade experience than what the Eels are fielding. I'm going to tip the Eels by 6 points, victory by 6 points, provided they can get back to the sort of form that they had prior to the loss against the Jets. And, mate, that brings us to Monday's main event.
Yeah, Monday. The King's birthday long weekend, public holiday clash. Bit of a mouthful there. And fittingly, the King brings up his double ton in the NRL. I think it was 5 games of Manly, 195 games of the Parramatta Eels, 200 games total now for Quinton Gutherson. So, big milestone game for the Parramatta Eels. You'd hope the boys are up for this one. Their talismanic captain celebrating one of the most significant milestones in his playing career that he's likely to have. Obviously he can push for 300 from here, but 200 is, even just 200 NRL games is a very rarefied club, isn't it, 60s, when it comes to the NRL?
Absolutely. By the way, will that mean he'll get to celebrate it twice within just over a month, like the 200 NRL games?
And then 200
for
Parramatta games, yep. So plenty of big celebrations for the King, and that means we start with him on the team list at fullback. You got Mike Acevo and Sean Russell on the wings, Will Penasini and Blaze Talangi in the centres. Obviously, Bailey Simonson out for the season, unfortunately, with that ACL tear. Dillbags and Mitchell Moses in the halves. Reg Jr. and Brendan Hands in the front row. Kelma Tuolangi, Bryce Cartwright and Jermaine Hopgood, who was backing up from that State of Origin Game 1 victory in the back row. Joe Fangahi, Sean Lane, Makahesi Makatoa and Wiramu Greg in the back row. Extended roster, you already mentioned at 60s, but Dejan Arce, also Morgan Harper, Joey Lussick, Ryan Madison, who we believe is actually nearing a return, which is big news there for the club, and Luca Moretti. On the other side, Bulldogs, who are actually doing pretty well this year. 6-6, I believe, on the season. So they're just outside the 8. They look like this. Connor Tracy at fullback, Kiraz and Wilson, the young gun, on the wings. Bronson Sherry and Stephen Crichton also backing up from State of Origin there in the centres. Matt Burton was part of the New South Wales camp but didn't play. He partners Toby Sexton in the halves. Front row sees King, Hughes and Marnie in the front row. Preston, Salmon and Mann in the back row. Interchange, Hayward, Curran, Moran and Hopoi. Extend the roster, Farmer Sully, Taff, Turpin, Hutchison and Hayes. The officials for this one, main man is Peter Goff, Dave Munro and Todd Smith on the flanks, and then in the box or in the bunker is Casey Badger. So, Eels met the Bulldogs already one time this year, 60s. That was round 1, kicking off out at Combank when things were much rosier. The roster was healthy, no coaches sacked. 26-8 victory there for the Blue and Gold. They were comprehensively better than the Bulldogs. But obviously, fortunes have changed since. Canterbury have found a bit of a rhythm. Defensively, they've been way more than adequate. They've been one of the better teams, if not one of the best teams in the competition, while the Eels have struggled, but then have they turned the corner? Did Mitchell Moses and Quinton Gutherson coming back, transform this roster the way it showed against the Sharks? Let's start talking about it. What are your opening takes on this clash against Canterbury?
Well, we have got Canterbury with a couple of key outs, with the exclusion due to injury of kick out, and also Josh Adokar. I don't mind them missing power on the edge. I don't mind them missing extreme pace.
After everything we've been through this year, mate, I don't care if any other club has a handicap anymore. I will take whatever we get.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I look back on that opening round, we were having to deal with that strike power. I think Adokar got injured early in the game from recollection.
You're correct. He did. He got a bit banged up.
Yeah, but we did a very good job of shutting down kick out. It was only late in the game, I think, when he exploded through an edge and set up a late try.
Through an outrageous pass, cut out pass through contact. Yeah.
So as far as getting the Bulldogs right now is concerned, we're not too happy about missing Bailey Simonson. We're not too happy about the fact that Maddo's been out for a number of weeks now, but likewise, the Bulldogs are missing a little bit of strike power. In a way, I'm a bit surprised that Drew Hutchison can't force his way into the top 17. I know he's not necessarily highly rated by a lot of people. I just think he's a very consistent footballer.
The problem is that he's not a halfback, though, isn't it? And
that's probably it. I would have thought maybe there was a place for him on the bench, but there's the Bulldogs have done a bit better than I thought they would with such a ragtag collection of utilities that's spread throughout their team from the fullback through to the back row and lock. I mean, Kurt Mann at lock. That's really, I wouldn't have thought Kurt Mann playing there, but I guess the lock these days is a lighter weight forward who can be an extra playmaker, and that's probably the role that he's filling. I didn't know too much about Bailey Hayward. Is he a pommy? Bailey Hayward?
I legitimately have no idea, so let me punch him into the old. There is a Scotland International Rugby League footballer who plays lock for the Canterbury Bulldogs, 23 years old. There you go. He's Scottish.
But before this year, where was he playing?
Does he have... There you go. He was playing... I do not know. I think he might have been playing competitions, NRL, World Cup. Playing reserve grade, it looks like.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if
Cup 22, Cup 23, Cup 24. So he's just Scottish lad, or maybe Australian Scottish lad.
Yeah, that's what it would seem like, because I wasn't too familiar with him before this year, and then born in Australia, Camperdown. So what do you know? Grandson of Paul Hayward, the former Jets player that had a colourful career and the end of his career. So, just interesting. So, I just didn't know too much about him before this year. And when I was sure I remembered him being in that Scotland team, so I had it in my head that he was from over there, but he's just come through the system. So, he's been a little bit of a revelation, to be truthful.
Yeah, he's been good for him.
Yeah, I've been surprised. He's been coming on. Has he been? I'm thinking he's been playing that playmaker lock role when he's been coming in off the bench.
Yeah, I think he's got a history of between 5'8" and lock, and in the NRL they're putting that together in a bit of a mishmash of that ball playing middle.
So, I mean, how do you rate the Bulldogs? Because they've been getting the results, they've been scoring some spectacular tries, even with some players missing. But I look at them and I go, okay, a bit of strike power out in the back line in Bronson Sherry and Stephen Crichton. But the forwards, workmanlike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with kick out of the equation, absolutely is how you describe their pack.
And I don't know if they're a side which individually, as far as the players are individually, that they would bring about any trepidation
No,
in
and
opposing defence.
having watched a bit of their football in recent weeks, just by switching on the TV and seeing what was on in terms of the footy, the Bulldogs are an affirmation of the importance of making your own luck when it comes to energy, enthusiasm, and putting yourself in a position to succeed. They've scored good tries, like you said, on the back of some of that dynamic factor in their back line, whether it's Sherry or Crichton. But they also score a lot of opportunistic tries. Ball deflects a certain way or takes a certain bounce. And they're the benefactors of it because they've got a chaser in the vicinity that's hustling through. So that's probably the concern for the Bulldogs, is that they're going to be really competitive. They're going to be disruptive, frustrating, on the ball, aggressive, and can you absorb that pressure? And they've done very well even the games they've lost, they've been quite competitive because of that attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's been when you're getting the results, there's confidence that comes with it.
Yep.
And I think, to their credit, what they do, I mean, you talked about competitive, so they compete, they stay in the play, they stay in the moment a lot during the game. So they don't give up in defence. They'll go for effort on effort. They'll be looking to support breaks better than they do that better than a lot of teams. They'll be looking to keep the ball alive or chance their hand, because, as you said, there's been moments where it's fallen their way. And if it's not broke, you don't need to worry about doing anything differently. Just keep doing more of the same. So their threat really is that competitive football that they've been playing. I guess what you've got to try to do is maybe to break their hearts at some point during the game. Now, whether that's the Eels forwards being able to assert some dominance through the workmanlike, by getting over the top of a workmanlike pack that the Canterbury Bulldogs have got, whether it be that Parramatta's prepared to be in the grind as much as the Bulldogs have been prepared to be in the grind. I'd simply like to see us flex a little bit of attacking muscle as much as possible. I want to have the Bulldogs feel, for the first time in a little while, that the game's getting away from them. I want to break their back. That's what I'd like to see in this. Now, whether we have enough confidence to do that, we certainly played a lot more decisively last week. I don't know if it was necessarily a case of being super confident, but in Shelley's column this week, she was talking about what it was like in the stadium last Thursday night. It was a long way from the biggest crowd you've ever seen at Combank Stadium, but the crowd really got behind the Eels, and the players responded to it. And you could see the celebrations last week from the players when in any of the moments that they won during the game, and be it celebrating a try or being able to shut down an attacking play, whatever the case was, when they were winning moments, they were sharing that with the crowd. It's probably going to be a decent sort of crowd out there on Monday,
Canterbury,
but there'll be a lot of Bulldog supporters.
Yes, Canterbury, they're faithful turnout in droves when the team's being competitive. So the fact that they're 6-6 and really peering deep into the seating for a top 8 spot means that they'll be out there. And I think Parramatta will have a pretty healthy travelling contingent too, given that we had the big win against the Cronulla Sharks. We're backing up with both Moses and Gutherson now, and there's that question mark of, are we back? And I think people will be curious to see.
Yeah. So, John, look, what I'd like to see is, as I said, us looking to flex our attacking muscle a little bit more. And I think we did that pretty much throughout the game. As I said, we were a lot more decisive in our ball movement. We got on the outside of the Cronulla defence quite easily a number of times last week, just simply through effectively shifting the ball. And I think like Sivo's first try was just strolling over, wasn't it? Like, he didn't have to do anything other than catch and stroll to the line. So, yeah, more of the same there. Are you seeing anything different to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of the defense, you just got to absorb the pressure that Canterbury are going to come at you with, because I think they'll come in waves. If they get a bit of possession, they'll be, pardon the pun, but chomping at the bit, as the Dogs there. And in return, like you said, I think defensively they're a very competent outfit now. I think Serrato's done a good job shaping that team in the image he wants, at least on that side of the ball. So the Eels are going to need to bring both strong fundamental play through the middle to enable a platform to be more adventurous on, and then use their points of difference like Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown, like their ball-playing back rowers like Bryce Cartwright, and even Sean Lane through the middle, someone that brings something a little bit different in how he can carry the ball and create different opportunities, and maybe attack them from slightly different angles, because they've done a very good job defensively across. If I go back to the draw, I'll give you 2 secs. I think they're top 2 in points conceded across the entirety of the NRL. Maybe in a time span, but they blotted the Titans. They kept the Storm to 16 points in a tight loss to Melbourne. 12 points and 2 points against the Knights, who are a very competent attacking team. Kept Penrith to just 16 points. Dragons to 12 points. So they've done a good job bottling up teams that, well, not all of them are top-tier teams. Obviously, some of them are on that list there. They're all at least proficient attacking teams. And the Eels are going to need to find a way to, the Canterbury are going to do their study on Parramatta, no doubt, when it comes to their defensive assignments. And the Eels can still come against them with those looks and still beat them if they execute properly. But they also have the opportunity to maybe do things a little bit different. And I'm keen to see what they can do. Obviously, the Mitchell Moses short side play is always a threat. Even if you know it's coming, it is so hard to defend because he comes at you with speed and the ability to run, kick, and pass, and that's hard to defend. So there's stuff like that that's going to work if the opportunity's there. But I'm keen to see if they do anything a little bit different, some different shapes, linking up Moses and Brown, or getting Gutherson to sweep or come at a different angle, maybe hiding behind a different player. And I'm keen to see what they do on Monday. Hopefully, weather permitting, because we have to wait and see whether this dreary and gloomy weather is set in for the entire long weekend or not.
Yeah, the one thing that Mitch Moses does, and you sort of alluded to that with your talk about him with his blindside plays and what he can come at you with on the blind side. It's because he's very good at reading numbers, at counting numbers in the opposition defence. He's one of those halfbacks who will be very good at playing what's in front of him. And if he sniffs out an opportunity down a blind side or close to the ruck, whatever the case may be, he's prepared to chance his hand. So that's why you will see a chip over the top. If the fullback's up in the line, Moses doesn't mind chancing his hand there. If he sees that the team hasn't numbered up as well on one side of the ruck, especially when you get into the red zone, he'd be counting numbers either side. If they're sort of more the centre of the field in the red zone, he'd be looking and counting where the numbers are, deciding which side of the play he's going to go on. You might see he and Dylan Brown linking up on the same side. Wherever Clinton Gutherson goes as well, he's that third playmaker that can, I guess, offer the alternative to which side of the field Mitch Moses goes on, or also you might see all three of them on the same side. So, like you, mate, I'm seeing that there are alternative methods of attack that we have in our arsenal with the return of both Moses and Gutherson. And I think, as I said before, we need to really flex that. In terms of defence, I think to the large extent we've been sliding a little bit better. I think we probably saw one of the better defensive games from Will Penasini.
Yeah, he was locked
last
in.
week.
He was locked in.
Yeah, he seemed to be reading that slide really well. Sean Russell, now he's been moved out to the wing this week, but at centre, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. When he's been sliding, having his pace there has worked well with the slide, but there was a couple of times he jammed in next to Dylan Brown, and he didn't need to jam in next to Dylan Brown. Dylan had it covered himself. So if there's one player that you would genuinely trust inside you who's a back, it's going to be Dylan Brown. So I just hope he keeps marking his man there in defence. The one thing that the Eels have been able to do really well against the Bulldogs in the last 18 months has been to completely shut down Reed Marnie. Like, completely shut him down. The Eels read really well. They know what he's likely to do. And Reed last year was a picture of frustration playing against his old club. Now, he's arguably in the best form of his career right now, Reed, and seems very comfortable with how the structure of the Bulldogs shapes are and his role within the team. Let's go about making him uncomfortable again.
Yep. Yeah,
that's the message to the Eels forwards.
And unsettling your opponent's best players is always a good strategy. So I know Reed's going to be trying to do the same, trying to get on the skin of our.
Oh, goodness knows he's going to be trying to get under the Eels players' skins, but the Eels players tend to be quite good at just having a giggle at him.
Yeah,
when he's
I think unfortunately for Reed, the existing interpersonal bonds there don't help him when it comes to niggling. They know what he's like and can laugh it off. But this actually sets up now to be a really good contest. Canterbury in really solid form. Parramatta off the back of their most important win of the season with their two best players back in the fold. And yes, they're down Bailey Simonson, and Ryan Madison isn't quite back to full health. But like I said, there's now this big question mark of, are the Eels back? And we're going to find out a lot on Monday. And on that note, it probably brings us towards the conclusion of the preview. So we'll start making our tips, big fella. Are the Eels back? If so, how are they going to win? Who's going to star?
Yeah, I don't think we need to guess too much about who's going to star. But let's look at how I think the match is going to go. I think it's going to be a tight contest. The Eels then starting to get away from the Dogs late in the game. I think Parramatta by about 14 points. Mitch Moses, again, will be the prominent figure out there in the Eels team. But last week I nominated another player that I expected to have a big game, which was Junior Paulo. This week
he hit that mark.
Yeah, I'd like to think that was effective in that selection. I'm going to go for a bloke returning from Origin and say Jermaine Hopgood to play a key role in this game.
I like that, and it's always interesting.
First try scorer. Can I jump in with the first try scorer?
I don't know. Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to go again with Will Penasini to be first try scorer.
Will looking to maybe get back to his best form now, which would be good. It's always interesting to hear that discourse about backing up for State of Origin. A lot of players like to have the short turnaround, like be back on the Friday or the Saturday, so lactic acid doesn't build up too much. You can just get through it again. But Jermaine has the very unique circumstance of that Monday turnaround, which you don't see during State of Origin, if at all, if ever. I can't think of many Monday games following a State of Origin, so I have to wait and see how he pulls up there. I will go for Parramatta Eels to win 28-18 or 26-16, somewhere in that vicinity there. Obviously, like you said, core players you can always nominate Gutherson or Moses or whatnot for best on field, but I will go for a left off-field option from them. Also on the back row, but not lock forward. Kelma Tuolangi, I thought he showed some really good signs against Cronulla, and I'm hoping he can, if not build on that, at least consolidate from what we saw against the Sharks. First try scorer, I will go for, he's back in the starting team. Let's go for the young kid, Blaze Tuolangi.
Okay, sounds good, mate. Sounds good. So we've basically nominated both centres.
Yes, yeah, but we've got back rows and centres as our theme for this one here. So it'd be interesting to see if we either of us get the chocolates here, and regardless of who scores first or who's the best on field, all we want in the end is a Parramatta win. And yeah, I'm really keen to see how this one plays out. Trent Barrett finally gets a week and a bit to prepare. So are we going to see some different systems? Probably not as much as people think. I think, Trent.
Well, of course, the other thing is too, John, that I was looking at that and thinking they get extra prep time, but with the New South Wales Cup team tomorrow,
it's also disruptive in that regard, isn't it? So
yeah,
you don't get to run the opposed sessions that you would like to.
No, it's almost like they will have 2 captains runs.
Yes,
being Friday and Sunday. So interesting prep that they do. I mean, they can work around not having the New South Wales Cup there. It just means they only get 1 day of 13 on 13.
Yeah, and given that Trent was the attacking assistant or one of the primary architects for Parramatta's attack, I'm not expecting too much to change, but I am keen to see if they can just get the slightly different looks in play against Canterbury. And yeah, I think a win. Eels have a lot of winning to do if they want to make the 8. I think they can afford 3 losses, maybe 4 for results going their way from their remaining pool of games, which is a very slim margin of error. But they've got to win against Canterbury this week to even begin to entertain that idea. And Canterbury are playing good football. So it's always good to have a nice Para and Canterbury clash. And we'll be back with you guys in the wake of that result, win or lose, with our Instant Reaction podcast. So until then, obviously, enjoy your weekend. And before we sign off, a final thank you to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta, again, for helping us get this podcast out every week. And big fella, I'll leave the proper sign off to you.
Go you mighty Eels.